Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today is August 8th. This is the level 1 recording for Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. And the topic today is non-religious Christ consciousness. So let me just rearrange my light in my chair just a little tiny bit over here. So in the Facebook intro that I was just doing, I was making it very clear, I wear a cross, but I'm not affiliated with any established church on this planet, with any official Christian doctrine, nothing at all like that. And I wear it because when I had the experience of coming into this body, like that experience in actual 2001, I had a direct connection or contact or experience of Christ consciousness. What I'm describing is a galactic level entity, a galactic presence. I'm not describing anything that is a bearded man in the sky. And I also make it really clear when I talk about these things that I'm talking about today, I do not mean to disparage anybody's faith, anybody's religion, or their viewpoint on earth. Like, there are some aspects of the Christianity that are very beautiful, and the aspects about helping one another and living your best life and really living as an embodiment of love. I think that is very beautiful. And there are aspects of it that I really do not agree with. And I'll get into making this distinction. And hold on a second. Thank you for bearing with me too while I drink my stuff. For everyone who's tuned in on the class, like if you're watching the archive afterwards, you wouldn't know about this. Just had like a major password reset issue. So I'm also just like getting back into my groove and everything like that. So let me also just clear my screen over here. And I've got lots of pictures and images to work with. So what I'm really talking about when I talk about this galactic scale of Christ consciousness, I'm talking about our own energetic anatomy. A lot of the times when I do these videos, I gesture to the center of my forehead. And that is, on the physical anatomy, the focus of where we would say this eye of insight resides. But on the non-physical anatomy, things are shaped differently. So I have lots of pictures in order to depict this. And the idea is we have two different levels of being able to see with pure insight. Sometimes we're seeing with insight on the level of anthropomorphic, and that means human-centered interpretation. But when we get up to the level of violet, like when we activate, it's like playing a chord. If I just play this note, oh, my piano needs to get turned on. That was funny. If I just play this note, then that's just seeing at this level. And if I just play this note, then that is the abstract level. What happens when we activate both levels at the same time? So I'm going to get all into the diagram so that you can see that we have these complementary aspects of anatomy that are what really constitute the higher faculties and being able to see clearly and also interpret correctly what we see. Because I also often say that using this aperture on your body is analogous to having like a super high powered telescope or a super high powered microscope. And if you have that, that capacity to look at things and learn about them directly, the question is, what do you focus upon? So one of the first things, I say this all the time, we have an attention that emanates from here. So I also should organize my thoughts and say this in a better way. We have two different aspects of self, not that we're only dualistic or whatever, but there's the fleshy part of us that is an internal gland in the center of your brain, the pineal gland, that is part of this imagination or inner vision. And then we also have the non-physical part of ourself. Just like I could say there's the physical piano key and the physical string that would be vibrating if I had a piano with strings. And then there's also the music that it emanates. So your physical gland structure in your brain, that's like the instrument that exists. And the music that it makes is the activity of actually having this energy field around your body that is your non-physical, higher dimensional vision. So all of this is about, here are the issues that are going on. There are many, many distortions at the anthropomorphic level of inner vision, of perception and interpretation. Just moving this light so it's a little bit better. Perception and interpretation are a bit distorted. And part of those distortions, I'll get to that question, Pedro, very good. And you have other good questions I need to address too. I lost the chat from the other one, so I'm gonna have to ask you to retype what you typed before. Religious, like if you have a lens and then there's imperfections in the lens or a smear, a smudge on the lens, the distortions that we are experiencing when we awaken or open this area of our anatomy have to do with religious teachings on the planet right now. And none of it is by accident. And again, I'm not here to try to say like, I've come to your planet, I've taken a survey, and your religion is wrong, and I will make fun of you now. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. What I'm trying to say is I have noticed that there are severe distortions in what should be a perfect lens that we can use to perceive reality. It's like pebbled glass, that instead of the light rays passing directly through that lens perfectly, it's warbled. And so what has happened in the past is, so humanity is coming from like the bottom layers, the lower notes, and then raising themselves up to the higher notes. So on that journey of moving up the ladder of awareness, humanity has reached this level. That was about 2,000 years ago. And it's the most vulnerable level when you are just there, but you haven't yet gone up to the final step on the ladder, which is connecting to the divine. So like I was saying, this is your attention. You have this magnificent apparatus of attention that you can use to touch on and learn about anything. The real question is, what are you going to touch on? What are you going to learn about? What are you going to learn about first? Because if I say, I also use this as the analogy, this apparatus, when it becomes functional, it is like getting your library card. So if you are a young person, like a little kindergartner, you're just beginning to learn how to read, and you get signed up for your library card, and then it's like, wow, you now have a library card, and you can go into the library and you can have access to any book, even a book that is way beyond your reading level, even a book that would be not only not fun for you to read, but possibly highly disturbing for you to read. Like, you shouldn't be reading about, whatever, genocides and atrocities. You're only a kindergartner. So what are the right things to do? The answer is consult the librarian. So if this is getting your library card, like, wow, you now have access to information, this is getting guidance. This is when you actually connect with your own inner librarian. This is nothing external. So big takeaways of what I am promoting here, or what I am sharing as my viewpoint, is that this is your own innate connection to divinity, and that Christ is an aperture on your body. Just like you have eyeballs that you use to look at photons, you have an inner eye that one uses to perceive the higher dimensional reality. And so now I should go into the whiteboard, and I should say that each one of us is like a retina on this much, much larger eyeball. I'm like doubting my technology now. Whiteboard. Technology, away, go, work. Good. So if this is your physical eyeball, and here's like the lens, and then here's the back part, and then here's the nerve. Well, I'll draw the whole thing. And apparently this person has blue eyes, right? So we're making a little tiny aperture there where the light comes in. And then back here is the retina. And the retina is filled with many, many, many tiny, tiny, tiny little cells. And the little cells, they are receptor cells. And the receptor cells are there in order to be stimulated by the presence of light. So here's a light wave going into your actual physical eyeball, and it goes back here and it hits a retina cell, and that retina cell then gets to send information to your brain that says, hey, I've been stimulated, something just touched me. And the total picture of reality out here, what you're looking at, is the accumulated viewpoint, like a mosaic viewpoint of all of these different little cells that are being either stimulated by light or not stimulated by light. And to use the example of another species, like if this is a bee's eye, I'm just being like very rough in drawing it because it's not shaped exactly like a hexagon, but it's shaped with all of these little tiny mosaics in it. I'm just doing this as an example. The bee's eye has all of these little tiny tilings or facets to it. And the composite eye works differently than our eye. This is our mammalian eye. The insect's composite eye takes like 10 million different snapshots. Snapshot, 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 snapshot. And then their little tiny bee brain makes an accumulation of all of these little snapshots, which are each one of these little, individual windows over here, and puts it together into a total image of, oh, look, I'm flying around a field and there are flowers. So what I'm trying to say is that in the biological realm, there are several examples of the total vision, like of holistic vision, being derived from many, many multiple subunits coming together. And in this case, what I'm speaking about Christ consciousness, I'm talking about the many, many multiple subunits being us, individuated consciousnesses that all have this aperture on our forehead that is the doorway to Christ consciousness. And that when we are activating that and when we are looking, using our big telescope or microscope to look at the world, we are giving stimulation, our information, signals about whether we're being stimulated to the great brain, that we are receptors on a giant eyeball, and the giant eyeball belongs to a giant galactic being. And I like to say that this giant galactic being is so large in scale that it is difficult for a human-sized neurology to even conceive of how big it is. So I understand, that's why I'm not making fun of like, you silly humans worshiping your bearded sky god. I understand that that face with the beard is a symbol for something that is so big that it's like, how do you even begin to have a conversation about it? How do you even begin to express your love? So I also understand, it's like, that's not, but I'm not, I don't, I want to understand it, but I don't want it to continue onward because it's become so distorted. And I understand also why people have that, like it's a security blanket, that the things that are comforting about the Christian religion are, you're never alone, there's someone who cares about you, there's someone who's with you all the time, like who's walking along with you. So I don't mean to disparage any of that. And it's truthful. It's just like saying if my receptor cells inside of my eyeballs were feeling lonely, it's like, hey, you're part of something bigger. You are. You're part of my whole system of perception. And hey, you're not alone. Hey, you're not alone. There's all the other receptor cells around you and the brain that you're transmitting to and the light that is stimulating you. Like you're definitely not alone. However, that's that distortion at the lens of the human level, the distortions in the human level lens. I'm sorry if that didn't come out right. The anthropomorphic level of reality is distorted because of the false teachings or distorted teachings of the Christian church. Those teachings are intended to disempower the individual and to control the individual. So let me just drink a little bit of water and I'll consult my notes, and because I specifically wrote down some of these things I wanted to talk about in terms of what is distorted on the level of Christ. Because what happens is, everybody's got their energy. Wait. Let me get to my pictures. Let me get to pictures. Can you see I jump around a lot? I'm sorry I jump around so much. That's why I take the recorded class, take the recorded classes, lessons, because I don't jump around quite so much. Go to the pictures that I've got prepared here. This picture right here. Hold on a minute. Let me also just drink a little bit more water. Okay, I hope you can see this picture. Oh, go to the annotation. Annotation, good. So energy is spiraling upward from the bottom of this figure, right? We have energy that is coming upward in this direction from the physical realm, through the emotional, through the intellectual, through the clearinghouse of the heart, through the throat, which is where we communicate, and then gets up to this level, which is the level of pure insight. And so many people have this experience of awakening. It could be described as a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, or it could be described as a spiritual awakening, or some people, I'm not exactly sure if I'm coming up with the right words, but it is, it can be spontaneous. Like I know someone that had this experience in the presence of the Dalai Lama when he came to visit my old town, Woodstock. And it's a very vulnerable position, because I hope you can see that there is this lens that is right here in front of the person's face. That when you are seeing at this level, you're seeing through the lens. It means you are interpreting all of the information in the book that you're reading through the human level of interpretation. And even if you do not consider yourself to be a Jew or a Christian, we are currently at this moment submerged within what I describe and define as a Judeo-Christian culture. And I know that there are many millions of people who live in the Far East who are practitioners of Buddhism or Hinduism. However, we're recognizing that there's the Western European dominant culture and the Judeo-Christian culture, that it all comes from the Bible, is what I'm trying to say. And the Bible as being the original holy book of the Jewish people that eventually transformed into the holy book and was amended of the Christian people, and that the values and the stories that are written in the Bible are pretty much of having an effect on the minds of everyone who is alive and who's around right now. And so there's many flaws in the Bible and what is being told there. We know the Bible's been edited, and it's another tool for this control structure. So part of what is happening when you look through this human lens is you're looking through the past, not only 2,000 years of the New Testament, you're looking through a 5,000 year thick accumulation of religiosity. Wait, let me get a different color for religiosity. Let's make that color like yellow. We'll say these wavy yellow lines are the teachings of the Bible and other expectations of religiosity. And so you're reading a book over here, but you're interpreting all of that information on the human level through this area that's been pretty much taught to humanity, passed down from generation to generation, acculturated, and even implanted in the DNA. So what happens, if I go back to my face, what I'm trying to say here is that some people have a spontaneous awakening by bringing their energy that is circulating through their body all the way up to this level, and then they see through their anthropomorphic filter, but they're not being guided by the great librarian, and they say, everybody, I'm Jesus. And it's like, okay, like you're getting part of the story, but not the whole entire story. And that is the danger of what happens if you just give a little kindergartner their library card. They can go into the library and read whatever they want to read in whatever order they want to read. So the truth is, yes, you are Christ. And the other next sentence in the story that you should read is, so are all of the other beings that are all around you. That anything, basically, Christ is synonymous with consciousness. And this is a big part of what is the justification for interventionism. Like I've made it very clear, I'm an interventionist. I'm a galactic scale being, and I'm like, hey, there's crappy crap going on down there, and it's affecting consciousness. And consciousness is connected to me because I'm consciousness too. Because I really am part of this, I'm trying to describe promote this idea that there's only one photon or one speck of consciousness that keeps on being emitted in time and then going back to the beginning, emitted on a different path, back to the beginning, emitted over and over and over, endlessly embroidering the surface of time. It's yourself. You keep on meeting yourself. So if you're meeting yourself all over constantly, and this relates to level 2 that I will get into with galactic personality characteristics, but the basics are, hey, if you're meeting yourself all the time, like what would you want to punch yourself in the face? No, you wouldn't just want to randomly attack yourself unless you're self-destructive, because I've given this teaching before and I had to understand, like, okay, like some people are self-destructive. Like some people do things for their body that aren't good, like they're smoking tobacco, they're shooting heroin, like some people are self-destructive. So those people might punch themselves in the face if they met themselves going around. But the whole idea is you have a different perspective on other, quote unquote, when you recognize that all consciousness is connected. And I'll get into that more specifically in level 2 because I have everything all prepared on that. I'm just getting myself some water here. But yes, but that's level 1 in this case relates a lot to level 2 because one of the ways through which we are connected is through Christ consciousness. So I'll also make a brief disclaimer. I am not affiliated with the New Age movement, and I know some people take issue with even using the vocabulary word Christ consciousness. And so, yeah, I don't know how others are using it, but I am using it to define an abstract network of consciousness that is on the scale of galaxy, like a galactic level being. So I'm not, because I know that there are people that channel and they say, Lord Jesus is coming through me, Lord Sananda is coming through me, all these different things. And I have to say, like, that is really distorted stuff because it's abstraction coming through the human filter, and it's coming through this 5,000 year long accumulation of debris on your windscreen. Hold on a second. So some of that debris says there is nobility to suffering. Suffering is necessary and didactic. One must suffer in order to grow spiritually. It also says there's a nobility to suffering, that you are somehow serving God and serving the divine by doing your suffering. And in the past 2,000 years, the distortions of the New Testament state that in order to achieve eternal life, you must die. That's like saying if you want to stay on the road forever, first you must drive off the road and then somehow get back on the road, and then you'll be on the road forever. So I've described in the past how I find all of those to not only be illogical, but that they are death cult intentional distortions, that aspect of religion is a long con, that it was programmed in a long time ago, so that when humanity would get to a certain point of its development, it would say, oh, now it's time for me to go to heaven. And even if go to heaven might mean like, I'm going to be claimed by space Jesus in a clank clank metal spaceship and be uploaded to his virtual reality fantasy land, which I think is one of the cautions. I'm giving a huge caution here. Like, no, we're not supposed to fly off into space on space Jesus's, mechanical contraption, or go to, like the show Black Mirror has this episode called San Junipero, a virtual reality fantasy land where you're young and beautiful forever and you have wonderful fun parties to go to all the time. And it's just like, it might be fun, but like you're stuck. You're not free. You are stuck in a like I say, a fantasy land, a world of imagination. So wait. So cautions on both of those. Don't get stuck in a world of imagination. But I also want to tell you that this emanation, what we do here, your imagination is a very real thing, and we use it to manifest reality. So I've spoken a lot about how our reality creation mechanism has been hijacked by those pesky occupiers of the interstices, and Christian religion and the story about what I define as the Roman Jesus is part of that distortion of reality creation, okay? So the Roman Jesus is the description of everything from that the Roman Catholic Church is promoting, including the story of the torture and crucifixion and death of this teacher from a long time ago. Okay, and I definitely should, get to some of these comments too. So I can also say, Aurora, like, was there a historical Jesus? I think there was a historical Jesus who was one avatar of Christ consciousness. So now I have to write this word. What is avatar? Avatar comes from Sanskrit, avatar, and it means one who has come across waters. So let me just write this out for you. Go to text. Do you think? So avatar comes from avatar, that is Sanskrit, and it means one who has come across waters. And in this case, the waters are cosmic waters. And it is a similar definition or approach to understanding as the ancient description of what a hero is in the Greek world. That a Greek hero, like we now define the word hero as like a mighty person who whatever has a mighty instrument, like I'm thinking of Thor's hammer or something like that, like, a strong, amazing person. What the ancient Greeks defined hero as a container for the gods, a person who was a physical container for a larger divine presence. And that is the definition of avatar too, the idea of being a physical embodied container for a divine presence. So I do believe and hold open the possibility that there was an actual embodied human 2,000 years ago in Judea who was an avatar of this consciousness. But that's not the only time that this consciousness has been in a physical embodied form. There are many other cultures where there are stories or myths about this. And then there are people who never got famous. They never wrote a book about them. And they were also embodied avatars. So yeah, if you want to check out Native American, there's Daganawida. And in the Hindu culture, there's Krishna. And those are just the ones that we end up knowing about, because there are many who are in obscurity. We never heard their names. We never learned their names. However, they are still retina cells on this much larger being. And when you're a retina cell on this being, and you're like, hey, wait, I know that I'm a retina cell in a giant eyeball, and I'm going to tell everyone about that, then it's like, you have a transformed experience. Wait. Okay, so I know I have to be more responsive to the chat before I move onward. Let me go over here and respond to some of these comments. Okay, and Petra has a different question. Let me get to that question later. Let me do all the Christ stuff right now. Eric says, modern Christianity is inverted on purpose. Yes, I'm agreeing with you in many aspects. It's false light. I mean, you are saved by the blood sacrifice of God's Son. Okay. So let me respond to that. So modern day Christianity is an outgrowth of ancient Judaism. I am saying this not to cast aspersions upon Jewish people or be needlessly offensive, but I got to tell you, Judaism is a religion of animal sacrifice. And although modern Judaism has mitigated or transformed that, there are vestigial traces. The vestigial traces include the Paschal lamb or the Passover lamb that must be present at the Seder, which is the celebration in April. And so many Jewish people go to the butcher, even if they're not eating lamb for the meal, they'll get a lamb bone. So an animal died, so you can have their symbolic bone to put on your Seder table. And also the Torah scrolls themselves must be written on animal skin. They cannot be written merely on nice cotton rag or hemp paper or something like that. It's got to be animal skin. And so the animals have to be kosher or, raised and killed in a certain way. And then there's also the shofar horn, the ram's horn that is blown on the first of the year of the Jewish New Year. So these are all vestigial traces. If they don't have those animal parts, then they cannot worship correctly. However, so this goes back to ancient history. Blah, blah, blah. Ancient history, a voice in the sky told a bunch of wandering, soon-to-be Israelites, but who were outcast from Egypt, hey, if you want to worship me, build a building, a tabernacle in the desert, and sacrifice your best animals to me. And that is basically the origins of Judaism from, over 5,000 years ago. And that voice in the sky told the Jewish people, yes, you should actually build a building for me in Jerusalem and burn or immolate for me, sacrifice to me a certain number of oxen, sheep, doves, or whatever per day so that I can feed my godly appetite. So I hope you can tell by my sarcasm that is not true divinity telling anyone to, immolate animals in their honor. Like that is the antithesis. That's death cult stuff. That's putting animals into the interstices between the membranes between worlds that could have lived for many happy years, but instead they're being killed and quote unquote sacrificed to a larger God. So fast forward, that's from the inception of Judaism, fast forward about 3,700 years to what we now call, the time of Jesus, the time of the Roman Jesus. And the whole idea of the beginning of that story in the past 2,000 years of Christianity is that now we're having a human sacrifice. That same God that said, I want you to sacrifice X number of oxen every day to me, now says, hey, I want you, humanity, to sacrifice this person over here, and that will somehow just snap my fingers, wave my magic wand, fix everything, and then you'll all be saved. That none of that sounds to me like divine behavior. That also sounds to me highly illogical. And so there's this, when I'm talking about the distortions on the lens, there's issues here. I saw this movie, it was a science fiction movie, and I thought it was very boring because in the end you find out it's just mommy issues. That the guy who's the evil villain or whatever, he's got all these issues with his mom, and that's why he's like a space guy, but he's in space blowing everybody up because of his silly unresolved mommy issues. That is what this story, that is the story of Judeo-Christianity, sounds like to me. It sounds like a being who is not a true God, that is a whiny infant-like deity, fake deity, that is saying, wah, 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 give me your burn all your oxen and all your doves and give them to me. And now I'm going to embody my own son, but then I'm going to kill my own son so that all of you can be saved because you're all ungrateful and you're all sinful. Like, that just sounds like the same type of, drinking water. Unresolved parental issues and resentment being played out in space. That does not sound divine or ascended or even emotionally healthy on a basic level at all to me. Just hold on. So there's aspects of emotion that need to be healed that I can see there. And there's also basic illogic of why does this person need to be embodied to then die? Is there not another way in order for humanity to be transformed? If humanity is somehow innately sinful, none of that makes sense. Okay, so now that's my basic critique of the whole Judeo-Christian idea. Now let's get into what we're actually supposed to be, more questions, but what we're actually supposed to be doing is embodying Christ consciousness. And we do that, I'm going to go back to your questions, but let me just show you some pictures. We embody Christ consciousness when we activate these aspects of self on our own anatomy. So when I've got the same, I hope you can see both of these images here, both of these sketches. It's the same thing from two different angles. And you can see how if I get the annotation, can I annotate? Whatever. I'm just going to do my cursor. This is the level of the indigo, and it nests within this area that is created by the vortex of your heart. That when your heart is emitting true unconditional love, that love tone, then you have a stable platform upon which to base your insight and understanding. that's a big part of it, that this is all based on the unconditional love that is not like a hippy dippy ideal. It doesn't mean you want to hug everything. It means you have the emotional fortitude to see clearly and understand what you are seeing. And that what happens when we all become activated on this level, like we're able to see multidimensionally, we're able to see through time. Not only do the things that we see, like we can avoid annoyances in the future, annoyances like death, we can also understand through insight the connection of events and have greater compassion. Because if you can see behind the scenes of a person's life, then you understand why they might be acting like a complete jerk face. Instead of just being like, oh, jerk face over there, you're like, oh, jerk face, but jerk face is the way they are because of blah, blah, blah that they've experienced. So then you can become more compassionate, more understanding, more loving of why jerk face is that way. And that understanding can radiate towards all of the things that are not right in our world, like everything that's out of balance, other human beings, also banking structures, social structures, religious structures, all of this is out of balance. And you can begin to see, wait, all of these things over here beneath the surface are connected to all of these things over here up above the surface. You get the multidimensional viewpoint. And when all of us do that, then that is this amazing transformation. That's what we're undergoing right now as a planet, as a species, and as individuals. So each one of us is raising our energy, opening our eye of insight, connecting to this great library of information that is this abstract world that we're submerged within, that I'm always painting over here. And I'll get into the difference between seeing on an anthropomorphic level and seeing on an abstract level. That is how you get past all of these religious distortions. Basic takeaway: Christ consciousness is a very, very real thing that is different than the fantasy or the fairy tale that the Roman Catholic Church that has given to humanity as a death cult, as a harvest operation, and as a disempowerment structure. And when you actually see on this level, then you begin to see, you would gain what we would consider to be superpowers. Oh, wait. So I missed a lot of stuff over here. All right. And Joelle was saying something really interesting. Yeah, that the eye is like a jewel. That's exactly right. That's what I was drawing before. And just wait, go on. Okay. Eric, Joel agreeing with Eric. Okay. Pedro says, many focus on Jesus's death and resurrection, but forget that in the end he ascended. Maybe the death and resurrection was in fact a change in timeline. There's all sorts of different ways that we can interpret that. In the best sense, I could say, okay, this mythological fairy tale of a man who died and then rose is planting a seed in your mind, just like when we talk about the idea of achieving the rainbow body, which is another type of unsubstantiated yet passed or orally transmitted story of people from the Far East who meditated in a particular fashion that eventually made them transcend the limits of the flesh. They achieved their rainbow body. So there are many, in many different cultures, there are many different stories that plant a seed in your mind that say, hey, you don't have to have a conventional death. You don't have to have a conventional cessation of metabolic body processes and decomposition and cessation of your consciousness. That would be a conventional death. So this is what it all comes down to. Each one of us really gets to write our own individual story of ascension. Like, what is the magical tool, the magic wand that comes into your life that makes you not have to die? So for some people, the magic wand is, poof, the death of Jesus. Oh, Jesus died on the cross, so therefore I don't have to die. Or for some reason, it's magical meditation process or whatever it is, doing certain exercises or whatever it is. It's like you have to fool the rational mind. And here's just a very, very brief anecdote about using magic and being the embodiment of magic here on the planet, which we all have the potential to do. I went to Mount Shasta, which is like a huge energy vortex on the surface of the planet. It's like a manifestation place. It's like if you're going to make a request, you have to make your request. Here's a microphone. I'm pointing to my microphone in front of the microphone. So when you go to actual Mount Shasta, you are like in front of the microphone. And I went there to do my little whatever, to have a little personal connection. And the window was down in my car. It was, first of all, it was like springtime, but it was cold on the actual mountain and there was snow. So I was like, okay, like I'm all bundled up, but I'm not really dressed for snow. And I was going to do my little, special connection FRL ceremony outside of the car. I'm like, I'm going to get in the car. And the window is down. I'm like, I'm still cold. It's snowing. I have to roll up the window. So I press the button, the window rolls up. And then I saw that the keys were not in the ignition. So technologically, theoretically, I should not have been able to make the window go up without the keys being in the ignition. What happened? What happened was I fooled my rational mind. I bypassed my rational mind by simply forgetting that I didn't actually have the keys in the ignition, and I theoretically should not have been able to press the button and activate the window to make it go up. That was a little personal experience that told me that in order to do things that would be considered or defined as magical by the rational, skeptical, objective materialist viewpoint, it's necessary to fool that viewpoint. So something like the story of a long time ago, there was a special person who meditated, and then all of a sudden they transformed. These are the beginnings of planting the seeds of how that transformation. So that's the best way that I can interpret that story. But then there's also real destruction that is like this. It would be so irresponsible and so erroneous if I were to say to someone like, hey, you know, if you want to have that dress forever, just incinerate your dress and then you'll have it for forever. Everyone would go around, have a huge bonfire, burn all of their dresses, and then they wouldn't actually get their dresses back. It's like, no, you just burned it up. So what if someone is telling you, hey, you want to have a perfected divine body and live in a beautiful heavenly realm and everything forever? Just, you know, die. Just die. That's all you have to do. And then when you die, you go to heaven. You get to have your dress forever. And I'm saying that in a malevolent way because I don't think that this is just a random accident. I think that this is all absolutely part of a harvest agenda. And that harvest agenda is programmed into almost every earthly religion. And it's even in channeled materials like the law of one, raw materials. I want to include that in my disclaimer. I'm not affiliated with Christian Church. And because in my level 2 stuff of my recorded lessons, I mentioned the law of one in terms of referring to what, you know, unity consciousness, but what really is the cautionary tale of law of one. It's channeled material that was influenced by these, you know, CIA synthetic telepaths. And at the end, once you read through all of this nice stuff, that's about how we're all part of the same fabric of consciousness, then it gets to the harvest agenda, where wonderful, benign extraterrestrials are going to come along and somehow rescue you in their clank metal spaceship. It's a harvest agenda. It's basically saying, oh, we planted you on that planet and now you've grown up to be fat, juicy ears of corn and now we're coming to get you. And like huge yellow caution flags on that. It's the whole idea that your consciousness would be uploaded to some dream world. I don't want you to have to go to a dream world. I want you to be completely free, where you are, you know, a dreamer, you are a collaborator, not where you just live as a participant, like an audience member in someone else's dream, which is what I think a lot of these not so divine beings want. I think they just want you as little power packs, little audience members, little adulators. We will adore you. We'll be there in heaven just adoring you all the time. And it'll be so great. And that they don't really want you to be free. And I think real God wants you to be free. Let me drink water. And being free means you have your insight activated, you can see where you're going, and you actually get to exert your own willpower. Okay, so Eric was saying the word Christian actually breaks down to Christ within. That is beautiful. That's the type of Christianity that I believe in, and I'm trying to get other people to embrace that too. He says, so worship of this external fictional character is in general very disempowering for most. Exactly. I'm breaking in order to agree with you and to say, if you say, Jesus writes the story of my life. On the one hand, that's comforting because if you got a problem, you're like, Jesus, I got to pay my electric bill. Like, give me some money. But on the other hand, it's disempowering because if you need to pay your electric bill and if Jesus is out to lunch, what are you going to do? You know, like you still got to pay the electric bill. And it seems to me that there's a lot of Jesus is out to lunch problems that are going on because I know a lot of people that can't pay their electric bill or have freaking cancer, or there are huge problems in children eating out of garbage heaps in order to stay alive and environmental degradation. Like if you're saying, you know, Sky God Jesus, fix it, wave your magic Jesus wand and fix it. That is not only disempowering to us, and also it's illogical. There's huge cognitive dissonance. Like, Jesus, if you love us, why is the ocean polluted? If you love us, why do babies have brain cancer? Like, none of that makes sense. It's part of that totally illogical stuff. And it also means you have to sit around waiting. Like, somebody else fix it. I got a problem. Somebody else fix it. As opposed to saying, hey, wait, here's a tool that you can use to fix all the things that you need to fix so that you don't have to wait around for Sky God Jesus. Isn't that a lot more fun and exciting? Like, here's a bucket and a mop, and you can actually fix all the things that need to be fixed and transformed. So back to Eric's comment. He says, You see the belief, I've accepted Christ in saved, more so that I am the Christ, therefore I walk the path and help others. That's right. Like if each person really said, okay, like if they have their awakening, because what happens, people have their awakening, but they're not up to this level yet. And they say, I'm Jesus, I'm Christ, I'm God. What I have said to people like over the past 17 years that I've been here as Aurora, when I meet people that are in that state, I'm like, that is awesome, fantastic, and congratulations. Now that you know that you are God and that you're divine, how do you respond to your creation? How do you treat your creation? It's like recognizing like, I'm a mommy, I'm a daddy, I'm a parent, I gave birth to a baby. All right, that's awesome. How do you treat your baby? What type of a parent are you? So the idea is to be a loving parent. If we are creating reality as our creation, you know, like we are, you know, just the same way that you create a baby as your creation. Just checking my time. I'm actually getting everything in this week. If you create your baby as your creation, then you have to say, you know, how do I treat it? Am I a horrible, abusive parent? You know, beat my child into submission to try to make it be good, or a loving parent that lovingly corrects the child and, you know, teaches it in that way. So, because I see a lot of people where they're like, I'm Jesus, I'm the reincarnation of Sky God Jesus, and I'm here to help humanity. So I'm gonna need a private jet. Like that doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I'm talking about? We're talking about like some of these false preachers that are out there that require private jets or giant mega churches or any of those things. So yeah, no excuse towards violence, no excuse towards amassing you know, too many resources that you don't really need for your projects. Like it's different if you actually need resources for a project that will help people, then that's different than just being like, I need a private jet. Yes, and I'm divine, I'm allowed to have that. So yeah, more comments here. Eric says, heck, even je suis, I'm French means I'm Little Caesar. Oh, that's interesting. Yes, exactly. Okay, so Joelle says, I never fully understood why you called it the death cult, Aurora, but now I've been learning where all the large religions came from. Essentially, these Sumerian, Phoenician religions that sacrifice children and drink blood, disguising themselves as benevolent religions. Joelle, thank you so much for your comment. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for being in this class. That is wonderful. That is exactly what this is. We're talking about ancient non-physical beings that have influenced human religion and human culture through all of what we would consider to be human civilization. And it does go back to ancient Sumeria, ancient Phoenicia, ancient Egypt, that there were religions that required literal blood sacrifice. And the way that it was described to their participants, if you want your crops of barley to grow, you must water the ground with the blood of your infants, and that way your gods will be satisfied. And, you know, to me, from my perspective, my galactic perspective, and even here embodied as Aurora, that's horrific. That is not how we show tribute to divinity, because divinity is life. So how can you say, yes, the way that you show love and acknowledgement and appreciation for life is to create death? That's what I keep on saying, because where's my little yellow sculpture? You guys are in my class for a long time now, so you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say this. Death is the aberration. You're not supposed to go slanty and hit the membrane of death and then have to recirculate again and again and again, or occupy the interstices. You're supposed to go right back to divinity. We're not supposed to have any amount of death. And so then you say, Aurora, how are we supposed to eat if we're not allowed to have death? We're supposed to eat pure light. That is the transcendence of the limitations that we've been placed in through all of what is known as recorded human history. So no offense to vegans or anything like that, but like you're still eating organisms, and we are still using microorganisms in order to digest our food probiotically. And if you're eating anything fermented, you're eating tons and tons of dead microorganisms that are nourishing your body. So it must be recognized that at this level of our submergence in the physical realm, we've had to make these accommodations. Something else has to die in order for us to be alive. When we transcend this level of physical embodiment, we become pure light eaters. Again, spoiler alert, we've been it before, and now we are reclaiming those capacities. So I should have said, one of the things, the magical superpowers that you get when you activate your inner vision, you get a higher dimensional telescope that you can use to connect directly to the sun. Sun is over there right now in my world. So yeah, instead of having to be like, well, I'm going to plant a seed and the seed will grow and the seed will make leaves that are like little solar collectors, and the solar collectors will collect the sun, and then I will eat the leaves. That's the cumbersome, laborious, around the corner way of doing it that we've been doing it as humans for a very, very long amount of time. What we're really supposed to do is say, I'm going to bypass the chlorophyll, and plants can be who they are and do what they want to do without me munching on them, without anybody munching on them. Plants have defense mechanisms because they don't actually want to be munched on. The plants can do their own thing, and the animals can do their own thing. And so if we're going into the human Judeo-Christian Bible, this is the story of, the Garden of Eden, the idea that before humanity, quote unquote, fell from consciousness, that there was no death in the Garden of Eden and nobody had to eat anybody else, and everybody, all the animals were on a first name basis, like, hey, Joe, how you doing? Don't worry, I'm going to eat you today. I'm eating pure light. Like, that was the way that our society functioned. But this, in a more literal sense, was the way that our society functioned before the fall of consciousness and what is known as the end of Atlantis. Before Atlantis, nobody died. Everybody ate pure light. So what we're talking about now is reclaiming those inner capacities and being able to leap over the necessity, the perceived necessity of either personal death or death of other organisms so you can stay alive, just drinking more water. So all of these things that say there's no nobility to suffering or nobility to death, when you hear those things, yellow caution flags. Also here, caution flags when you hear from any God that says suffering is necessary and didactic. That's like a parent that says, I must beat you in order for you to learn. No. And you know something, I'm not a physical parent. I would love to be a parent one day, but I haven't had any children. But I do have, who's back there on that little chair back there? We got Cheeky, she's right back there. In terms of caring for her and teaching her proper social behavior, socializing her. I never hit her or make her suffer, and punishment as a way of teaching her. Now, all of my teaching of her and getting her to be properly behaved and non-aggressive and all of that has all been through positive reinforcement and love and reassurance. That's the type of parent that I am. It's the type of galactic being that I am. Suffering is not didactic. That means if you go to school, you go to school to learn. You want to learn 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's not like we are going to beat you. I'm going to beat you and whip you if you don't learn that 1 plus 1 equals 2. That is actually not learning. That is not educational. So that's part of the distortion lens that is in the anthropomorphic level, that humans have been programmed genetically to feel so diminished that they actually think that they deserve to be beaten. They're like, okay, universe, bitch slap me, I deserve it. It's like, no, you don't deserve that. That's actually horrible, horrible abuse. And just because you're used to it, like that is not a sign of love. Being hit with a wooden spoon is not a sign of love. Healthy boundaries are a sign of love. So in the example, with my little dog over there, there are some behaviors that are just like, no, that is not acceptable. Showing aggression towards other people, like trying to bite or nip them, no, that is not acceptable at all. And if she ever tries to do that, she does not like gardeners outside, like lawn care people outside. So sometimes she gets a little bit nippy or whatever. If she tries to do that, we take a time out and we have a conversation about it. But there's no hitting, there's no yelling, there's nothing like that. There's no being berated and then rectification. When we walk past gardeners and she doesn't get upset by them, she gets TREAT, which I have to spell out because she's so intelligent that she will actually listen and come over here and actually want to get what I just spelled out. So now on to more questions. Joelle says, really good resource to learn about the death cult origins. Okay, wonderful. You've got a link here. I don't know how to share it possibly on the screen so that people can see it later on. That's a really good question. It's DylanLewisMonroe.com, Sephirot map. So I'll just read it out. It's that DylanLewisMonroe.com. And it's the Sephirot map if you go to that website. So and I don't know what's at that website, but Joelle recommends it. Eric is making a wonderful comment here, tying it all together. He says, I is a time crystal. Beautiful. I thank you for your wonderful comment and your wonderful insight and participation here because you're spot on with that. This eyesight that we're seeing on the higher dimensional level, it is higher dimensional. We're seeing all time at once. That is a different perspective than if you're like sitting in the movie theater watching one frame of the movie at a time flicker past your eyes and feeling like you're submerged in the story. When you see all time at once, you're seeing the first frame of the movie and the last frame of the credits all at once. You see a person's life all at once. You see their birth through their death. You see even into their ancestry. Where did their body come from? You even see their descendants. You see context, and it looks abstract. So wait, let me just go. I'll go to more questions, and they're wonderful questions. But I also, before the recording gets too long, want to talk a little bit about the anthropomorphic and the abstract and the way they actually look when they interact. So I'm going to get to the next. Oh, wait. Good. Okay. Let me talk to this but I'll show you these pictures. Eric says, okay, so wait. Joelle says, I just visited Shasta for the first time and have never felt energy like that before. It's pretty powerful. You're in front of the cosmic microphone and the cosmos is definitely listening. And I think it just amplifies whatever you naturally have inside. That was my big lesson. I had to bypass my rational skepticism, and being there is just amplifying what I already had. And I think that we're being exposed now to cosmic radiation that is coming to our entire planet, that you don't just have to go to a special sacred holy place like Shasta to feel those levels of manifestation. You can manifest from your living room, I think, at this point, that we've all had the volume turned up on our wish-making facilities. So this is what I wanted to respond to from Eric. He says, that is why Christians say Amen or Amen after prayer. Full name is Amen Ra. That is absolutely correct. So if we really look at, I'm just checking my time, the origins of Judaism, it comes as an outgrowth and a response to the religion of ancient Egypt. Amen Ra is the ancient Egyptian description of a particular deity. And when you say Amen, it is saying, and so this particular ancient Egyptian deity is pleased. So now you have to understand who the Jewish people were. Before they were the Jewish people, before they were given the Torah by a voice in the sky on Mount Sinai, they were outcasts of the highly civilized, highly cultured Egyptian society that was actually based on having psychic powers. And having psychic powers is basically, you know, when you're up to this level, but you're not completely connected to the abstraction. Because when you are connected to the abstract librarian tells you what to do with your psychic powers. You don't just do random stuff. So you're not going to randomly connect to anybody in telepathy, randomly use your telescope to look at something you're not supposed to look at. Like, for example, you're not just going to use it to be a peeping Tom and look at someone, ladies changing in the changing room before they go into the shower or something like that. That is like the lamest use of your psychic telescope, but also you wouldn't do that because you'd be listening to the divine telling you what to look at and what to do and what to speak and where to send energy. So that was what the real highly evolved Egyptian culture was all about. The people that were at the creme de la creme, the people that had the biggest psychic muscles were the rulers and were the people that were in charge. And then it went down the hierarchy. If you had less and less and less psychic powers, you might be like a scribe or, you know, a common worker. And then there were the outcasts that lived in the desert and they dwelled in tents and they had animals that they used. You know, it was a very meager existence, like being an indigenous person. And they did not have activated inner vision. They were like dead spark plugs. So basically a voice in the sky, a sky god, a self-proclaimed god came along, genetically modified that tribe and made it so that they could hear that extraterrestrial presence in the sky. And it presented itself as God and said, hi, I'm God, listen to me. You're going to fight the Egyptians. You're going to take their source of power. You're going to come over here. I'm going to give you these holy books. You're going to start sacrificing animals to me. And that was the origins of the Jewish culture. So now that we've done a total awesome history lesson here on where religion comes from, it has its deep roots in antiquity that's so far back that it's hard to even find accurate information about what human culture was like then. We're talking about deep, deep ancient Egypt, and that it has to do with non-terrestrial, extra-dimensional beings who are not actually humanity's allies, but who are instead exploiting humanity in many ways. So yes, at the end of both Christian and Jewish prayers, I think Jews say amen, and I think Christians say amen. And it is absolutely in reference to an ancient Egyptian deity, God, self-proclaimed deity, that has been harvesting energy from humanity for a very, very long amount of time. Pedro says, I thought that amen means so be it. So I've read that it means, and so God is pleased, and that's so be it is another way of thinking about it. But just understand that these syllables and they're like melodies, you know, sound structures, these symbolic sound structures, they have a meaning. And so even though you might ascribe more new, you might plaster over a new wall, we're going to wallpaper that with some new meaning, but it's got the basic structure of where that sound structure actually comes from. Pedro says, could it be Amon-Ra, A-M-O-N, as opposed to A-M-E-N, Supreme Creator God of Ancient Egypt? That is exactly right. The A-M-O-N became A-M-E-N and is still woven into our present understanding of spirituality in understanding the Bible. I want to show you some of these pictures about the interplay of violet and indigo. Just show you these guys. I just showed you these guys. Show you this one over here. Hold on, and go back to the, what do I have to do in order to get the annotation? I've had this problem before, guys. I'm just like, how do I annotate? How do I annotate? Maybe this will work. Nope, not working. Hold on a second. I know there's a way to annotate. Okay, never mind. Instead of just, I'm going to just point with the cursor over here. There's an interplay between these two chakras, one of which is oriented what I would describe as horizontally, with this lens in front of your face, and one of which, and that's the indigo, and one of which is oriented vertically, and that is this violet chakra that's over here. That is literally the highest note in the octave of humanity. And that violet chakra is the guide. It is like your connection to divinity. It is the connection to the source that emanated you, or the singularity, or higher dimensional, less dense realms, or pure intelligence. Pure intelligence, that is where we get our directives for what note to play. What note should I play? There's 80 keys on the keyboard. That's a lot of possibilities. What note should I play? I don't know. Ask the composer, ask the conductor. That violet chakra is your connection to the composer and the conductor. And in previous lessons, I've described this, I've been doing this class for like 5 years, so in previous, way back, I used to describe the interplay between these two chakras as being like a marriage, until I started to understand that that's distorting to use that language, because many earthly marriages are very out of balance, and they're based on exploitation, and there's all sorts of sexual politics that are being played, power games that are being played. So then I realized I have to use a different system of description, that there's a partnership or an interplay between these two aspects of anatomy, in exactly the same way that your heart and lungs have an interplay. That it's not like your heart is in charge and your lungs have to listen to your heart or something like that. They're both equally, go back to my face, both equally important in the overall functioning of your body. So in your chakra system, this violet chakra, that is your highest note on your octave, that is analogous to the very sensitive needle in the middle of a compass. That it's a sensor that senses which direction you're supposed to be going. And the indigo chakra that it nests within is supposed to be like a protector, and also like an apparatus. Like if you have this kind of like a mechanical device, like a gyro stabilizer that needs to twist and turn around like this, and you've got like a collar that kind of holds it together. That's what these interplay of these two things are supposed to be. So this level of indigo in your own mind, in your own body, is supposed to be like a secure position that allows that area of complete sensitivity to do its job, that needle on the compass to do its job, to swing freely, and to say, oh, I sense that the source is over there. I sense the destination is over there. We're supposed to be going here. We're supposed to be going here. So there's never supposed to be friction. It's never supposed to be like, well, my abstract connection to the divine over here is telling me my eye needs to, oops, sorry. Everything's fine. It needs telling my I need to look over here in this direction. But my eyeball is like, no, I'm naughty eyeball. I want to look over here instead. You're not supposed to have those levels of fighting. But I had to understand, like, oh, if I'm describing this as a marriage, everybody's used to fighting with their spouse. Like, I want Chinese for lunch. No, I want Italian for lunch. Well, let's fight about it. And I'm not talking about, the battle of the sexes here. So what I'm talking about is a partnership, the way that our heart and lungs are in a partnership, where the very, very sensitive apparatus that connects us to the divine is protected and housed by this other level of consciousness, and the other level of consciousness over here is directed by this higher dimensional intelligence. So you're supposed to happily and joyously accept guidance from your own divinity, your own innate divinity that tells you where to look, where to go, how to learn, and in what order. It's like having a really, really great teacher, or being homeschooled by a parent who really loves and wants you to grow to your fullest potential. So it would be like saying, first we're going to read this page of the book, then we're going to digest it and understand it. And then when we've accomplished that and we're done with all of the exercises on this page, then let's go on to chapter 2, and then let's go on to chapter 3. And all of this information is set in a particular way that's presented in such a way that it gives you an accurate view of reality and that it leads to greater health and vitality. Because if I wanted to give you less health and vitality, like I could give you information that will make you go up the center of this sculpture and make you a perfected individual, or I could give you information that sends you off into a tangent that actually makes you hit the membrane of death. And so information that's a death cult stuff that says, hey, all you have to do is die in order to live forever. Burn your dress and then you'll have your dress for forever. That is basically false information that is telling you, oh yes, you know, you will go into the membrane of death. And that, like that is, if we wanted to mess with you, we would give you erroneous information through your insight. And that's what's been going on with humanity for at least the past 2,000 years. It's been going on with humanity for a very, very, very long amount of time. It is very difficult for humanity to achieve clear information, get clear information from their insight. And now things are finally being changed. And if we were to look at this as a planetary issue, like if this is the planet herself, and there are different layers of consciousness that are going out there, this is what some people have described as a space fence, or a technologically augmented membrane that prevents energy from effectively going from beyond certain levels of, you know, Earth's surface up to the stratosphere, but not beyond. That's what we're talking about. This is literally the origins of the space fence. It is a distortion of consciousness, because when you do this type of interdimensional travel, you're not doing clank, clank, metal spaceship travel, you are traveling with your mind. So if there's a religion that has implanted expectations within you about death or about afterlife, that's a big thing I should have said about afterlife, about religious history. And I'm not going to worry about how long this recording goes. Let's just do what we need to do, and then I'll go to level 2. In terms of religious history, the ancient Egyptian religion was all about cultivating a successful afterlife. It was a funerary tradition where basically their idea was this realm that we're in, dimensional, you know, third dimensional life, is the training ground for what happens when you actually die and you try to live forever in an afterlife realm. And the Jewish religion was in response to those, you know, the idea of mummification and trying to achieve immortality through technological means was a response to that. And traditional Judaism did not have a teaching about afterlife. So the religion of the ancient Egyptians was completely focused on afterlife. Everything was about having a good afterlife, having a successful afterlife. The Jews, in response to that, or the people who became the Jews in response to that, did not have a teaching. They didn't say afterlife even exists. They just said after you die, your consciousness goes to a gray place of wandering that is called Sheol, S-H-E-O-L, not a hellish place of punishment, not even a purgatory where you are working off your sins, but you just kind of wander around like a limbo, a gray limbo, but not a fun type of Caribbean limbo, just like a wandering around limbo. And Christianity's response to that was to give us the teaching, the software program, I'm not a transhumanist, that says this is what afterlife is. So when the crucial watershed moment was with the invention or inception of Christianity and the Roman Catholic Church, there became a very established expectation of afterlife. What would happen to you after you died? Where would you go? And also, what do you need to do to go to heaven, to have a good afterlife? Because now we have the invention, not just a gray wandering place, but literally a place of horrible torment and torture that you get stuck in forever, or a place of wonderful rewards that you get to go to forever. And of course, they're both equally false. They're not real freedom. Like real heaven is real freedom. And that is the freedom when we are structured perfectly and we're free to go wherever we want to in the world. So not just being stuck in a little cyclical loop that is called Christian Fantasyland heaven. So the expectations of afterlife have everything to do with flying into space without a clank clank metal spaceship. It has everything to do with what humans expect is possible. So part of this now is when you activate your higher faculties and you start to see what the first thing that people often see is they see themselves as the Roman Jesus actually being crucified or actually going through those torments. So what they're doing is they're seeing the smudges on the lens and the bugs that are stuck on the windshield, and they're examining them in great detail and they're identifying with them. Because that's another thing I should say. This aperture on your body is not only about imagination, it is also about identification. That when you touch on something, like if I'm like, oh, I really, really want to learn about houseflies, so I'm going to extend my attention, attenuate, and touch on an actual housefly. And then what you actually find out is there's no difference between you and the housefly. You are the housefly. That is one of the magical things that happens when you begin to touch on things. You want to learn about a flower, touch on a flower. And you touch on it and you learn everything there is to know about a flower directly. And then you also find out you're a flower too. So when people start to have a false awakening, they've got to this level but not this level. A lot of the times they erroneously identify with things that are not actually themselves. And we'll get into level 2, figuring out these cosmic personality or galactic personality characteristics. But a lot of the time they open up their third eye, they see the distortions on the lens, and they identify with those distortions. The story of the crucified man in Judea. And they say, I'm that person. I'm Jesus Christ Superstar. I did all that suffering. And now I'm here to save humanity and all of this stuff. And so it is a distortion of what is actually supposed to be the realization that you are Christ, but you're not the suffering Christ. That's a big one. The church tries to tell you like, oh yes, you're supposed to be here, but you're supposed to be poor. And you're not supposed to have anything good happen to you, and you're supposed to be beset by evil. And the church also teaches, this is very erroneous, that this is the devil's playground. Oh, the third dimension is inherently flawed and is the place where Satan gets to rule, and Jesus only gets to rule up in heaven. And that's why there's so much misery here. Like, there's huge amounts of cognitive dissonance on that. That's the whole idea of like, you know, that the I say this all the time. I'm sorry if I'm repetitive, but there's that little poster with the footsteps that are walking along the beach, and the inspirational quote, and it says, remember when there was only one set of footsteps? It's because I, your Lord Jesus, was carrying you. And you could be like, okay, Lord Jesus, like, why are you making my life so hard that I gotta be carried? That's the real question. Like, why didn't you make my life super easy and then I don't have to be carried across the beach? So there's real logical questions that can be asked in that level. Okay, wait. Pedro's saying chakras are like Matryoshka dolls. Exactly. That is exactly what they are. Nested, fractal, symmetrical, self-similar, tiny fragments. And that is what we actually are as aspects of Christ. Not the Roman Jesus, but aspects of galactic Christ. That we are shards or fractal segments, holographic segments of the whole. And that's why each one of our personal journeys is beautiful and is significant. When people open up their inner eye and they're having these distorted visions of being Jesus, one of the messages is, you matter. Your life matters. What you do with your life and your suffering and your transcendence of it matters. And that's actually truthful. But what is not given in the distortion viewpoint is the context. That was one of the things in my notes I wanted to make sure to get to. That what breaks through all of those distortions is context. When you recognize, wait a minute, everything here is a shard of Christ. The grass that I'm mowing on my front lawn is a shard of Christ consciousness, because Christ is synonymous with consciousness. Is my grass conscious? Yes, it's conscious. And so my grass is like, I'm growing. I'm being mowed by some horrible loud mower. I'm growing. Like I'm mowing consciousness. My dog is consciousness. The microbes in my tummy are consciousness. So that's why I really try to get everyone into these ideas of how do we actually fix and heal everything. The idea is no longer having to have any death of any organism, because that death of microbes and death of blades of grass, it's all conscious. And this is also like, well, Aurora, like, who do you think you are to come here and have change things on earth and blah, blah. It's like the stuff that's happening in terms of consciousness down here is affecting me. It's affecting me on every level. It's affecting everything on the level of all the stars. So we're all so interconnected that you cannot say, hey, who do you think you are to intervene? We're totally interconnected on the level of pure consciousness. And now we're getting to levels of telepathy. So when I talked about the space fence, we're talking about limitations on your natural telepathy. And what other people are doing with their synthetic telepathy, with their technologically augmented mind waves that they're sending out, and with their dark technology use of transforming reality and distorting reality, they're affecting me, they're affecting you, they're affecting everyone. So it's kind of like if you find that there's a big surveillance computer program that's going on. P.S. There's a big surveillance computer program that's going on. And you're like, wait a minute, it's not just surveilling that guy over there or that famous guy over there. It's surveilling everyone. That's what's going on. These are why should you care? Because it's affecting everyone, because it's limiting your own journey. So the smudges on the collective lens of humanity are limiting your journey. The erroneous people that have a partial awakening, P.S. a lot of these partial awakenings are augmented by drugs. Sometimes it's methamphetamine or LSD or mushrooms or whatever. And like, you just got to be really, really cautious. If any of your, huge religious awakenings or insights happen when you're under this influence of a particular molecule. You have to say, wait a minute, did my Christ awakening come because I took a molecule, and how can that happen? So yeah, I'm all really advocating for natural exploration of these higher states of consciousness. Joelle says, is that what remembering past lives could be? Seeing yourself as these other beings in other times. That is exactly what remembering past lives is. So first of all, past lives are concurrent lives. All these lives we're having at the same time. Second of all, there's only one photon. There's one little point of consciousness that keeps on coming out and having lives and then going back and having more lives. We're one person. We are one being that keeps on having all of these experiences. So the experience of having an opening, like this could be profound. If you open your inner eye and you use your tendril of attention to touch on other people, you could be like, hey, I am you. You are me. There is no distinction between us. It could be used as an amazing way to feel, I don't want to just say the word brotherhood, familyhood, brotherhood, sisterhood, being in relation to other living beings, that a butterfly is you, a tree is you. Now we're getting much more to the idea of like a Native American or an indigenous viewpoint, that you identify with the landscape. This land is you. You are this planet. This planet is you. In a very literal sense, the trees are like the alveoli in your lungs. They're branched in the same way. And the rivers are like the blood supply that goes up and down your arms. And, there's all of these literal analogies in the anatomy of the planet and the anatomy of our own body. And then there's also, more spiritual analogies. So yeah, when this awakening is directed by real divinity, the end result is you recognize you are God. You are everything. You are connected to everything. Everything that's alive around you is part of you. And your justification for actions is based on love. So you would never be like, oh, look, that grass out there is me. Wait, I hate me. I'm going to go destroy that grass, or I'm going to go cut down those trees. Like that, I'm just going to drink something. There's been a lot of unhealthiness. Hold on. In the Western industrialized viewpoint came to, North America and is like, look at all those resources I can cut down and use for my own stuff. Like, this is great. Let me go take what I want from the land. So that's not a justification. You can't be like, oh, look, that's my arm. So I'm going to, like cut it up and, turn it into bits and do whatever I want with it. You're supposed to be like, hey, that's my arm. I want to treat it really nicely. I want to keep it alive for forever. You're supposed to be like, hey, those trees out there are me. I want to keep them alive. I want to keep them healthy forever. I don't want to cut them down and turn them into toilet paper. That's not, but I understand now we're in this unhealthy world where some people would be like, yes, let's cut down old growth forests and turn them into toilet paper because that's me and I'm allowed to do that. So that is the distortion. If a person's just at this level, I call it megalomania, where they think like, I'm the center of the world. Everything is me. I'm allowed to do whatever I want. And the truth is you are the center of the world, but everybody recognizes that they are their own individual centers of the world. And you are allowed to do whatever you want. Yes, you are, but you're not supposed to say, hey, wait, once I realized that this arm was me, I then decided that I wanted to, bury it with nuclear waste or to turn it into something horrible. Like, why would you do that? I don't want to do that. When I realize something is me, I'm like, oh, I want to treat it nicely. It's me. So yeah, the awakening is supposed to make us all much more loving and respectful in our behavior as opposed to violent and exploitive in our behavior. So I think the real question when people start to identify with past or concurrent lives is why that life? If you're like, oh, I identify with Mother Teresa, like why that life? Because you're everybody. So we have to ask there's the preferences that are being expressed through the anthropomorphic filter are moderately distortive, because you also then, oh my God, I know someone in my life and they got a past life reading and someone told them that they were like one of the, a person that like dropped the bomb, one of the A-bombs. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's such a heavy responsibility that they carry in their life now. And they carry it very heavily. But the truth is we're all that person. And my friend who got the reading was Mother Teresa in a past life. Or let's use whatever, the best saint, the most nice, wonderful person the highest example of everything. Yeah, we've all been the greatest saint and we've all been the worst maniac. And that's the real picture that you get when you're guided by the great librarian. But what if you're a kindergartner, you decide, oh, I'm going to go into the library, take out whatever book I want, and the first book you take out, you read the first page and it says, you were Hitler in a past life. You're like, oh my God, I was Hitler, and then it affects you and everything like that. So the more important teaching would be to a little kindergartner to say, hey, we've all been everybody. Hey, we are a conglomerate of many different experiences. Hey, we have a balance of both positive and negative in you, and blah, blah. So you're beginning to understand this. So Pedro says, we are all shards, and when we all figure this out, we will be able to join the shards to form the crystal. That is exactly right. A crystal, like a perfect tessellation, or when you put together puzzle pieces. When you put together, a tessellation means a tiling. That's in geometry, when you fit together polygons so that there's no space in between them, you have a tessellation. And that is what happens when each one of us becomes perfected and we activate our higher faculties and we join together on this natural telepathic network. That is like, we start to play really good music with our minds together. That is the real awakening of this planet. And it also means the planet herself, like we are little cells, individuated aspects of a much larger organ on this planet. When we start to activate collectively as humans, the planet transforms, because it's like all of a sudden it's an operational organ. It's not a dormant organ. We begin to act very differently. So even what one person playing their Christ-like music is very powerful, but many, many musicians playing their Christ-like music at the same time becomes a symphony that is incredibly powerful. And it also becomes music that not only are you playing now in this moment, we're connecting to musicians who might have lived in deep antiquity, or who might live in the future, or who might live far away on totally different star systems. And I'm going to use that to segue into level 2. But it becomes incredibly powerful. And I believe that as like the great hope, not like false hope, but a real, real hope, that as we awaken to these higher levels, we can transcend and supersede all of those limitations, all of the constraints, genetic constraints, the occupiers of the interstices, the invasion of this planet. Our natural magic, joining together as many, many minds coming together as one, is so much more powerful than any clank, clank metal magic. That's what I'm trying to say here. So, and it's why they try to suppress it so much. It's why they've tried to add all of these lies and deceptions about what Christ is and what Christianity is. And Christ itself is incredibly loving. Let me just drink. It is incredibly loving. And it's so loving that it's like, if you come from an abusive society, we come from a very abusive society. Many people's families are abusive. It's like they almost don't know how to recognize someone who is really loving. Or if you get a dog who's a rescue dog, right? Who's only ever been treated like crap, and who doesn't know, like, wait a minute, you get to have a dog bed? You get to sleep in the person's bed? You get to be petted and hugged and groomed? Like, that's a completely different expectation. So a lot of people, in developing their idea of what Christ would be, what divinity would be, they come from such an abusive background. They're so abused in their feelings that they think like that's just normal. But no, that's not just normal. So we all need to recalibrate as to what we even think is appropriate behavior, appropriate ways of being treated and treating one another in order to expect a better level of interaction. I'm just reading the rest of what you say. Joelle says, so really, when you see your other lives, you're seeing the other lives that source was/is. Absolutely, I'm agreeing. It doesn't necessarily matter what life you see. You could be identifying with a certain life to learn something from that particular one that your ego structure may need at this time. Beautiful, bingo, perfect insight. Each one of our egos, it's like if you need a nutrient, like your plants outside, maybe they need magnesium, maybe they need iron, maybe they need copper. And if you give them the right nutrient, then they flourish. So with your ego, if you're given the right nutrient through your mind, through inner vision, then you will flourish. So let's say you have a natural vision where you see, I was blah, blah person in the past. And that vision of who you were helps you to better understand and unlock who you are now, what is going on in your life now. Then you're able to say that was a critical enzyme or nutrient that I could use to unlock my experience now. That's because you're being guided by divinity. You're not just seeing random things like, oh, I remember I was in a past life and I was pushing a wheelbarrow and I, lived in medieval Europe. And like, is that helping you to unlock your experience? Does that help you to understand who you are now or to treat others in a better way? So the whole idea is, if we really trust the guidance of this higher dimensional inner aspect of self, it's your own, you're teaching yourself. You trust your own inner teacher. And you say, well, I was shown that vision for a particular reason and it relates to my life, as opposed to like if a person decides they're going to take ayahuasca or they're going to take LSD or whatever, and they trip out and they just see a bunch of random stuff. And then they think, oh, like this is random stuff, but the experience tells you that it's significant. It is significant, but not if it's taken all out of context. Pedro says, so the Christian cross has something to do with the indigo and violet chakra making a cross also. Excellent insight. And the answer is yes. I should have just said this flat out. When my inner eye is activated, I literally see a cross. I literally see this shape. Like imagine that I'm looking through this shape. It absolutely looks like there is an equal armed cross. I'm not trying to make weird symbols on my face, but you understand completely. Historically, the Christians, after the year 0 of the Common Era, but before 325 in the Council of Nicaea, greeted each other with the greeting of making the sign of the cross on their forehead here. That tells me that there were some very real experiencers in that time, that their religion was not a mere intellectualism or something where you read from a book or talked about something or sang a song, that they were actual first-person experiencers of seeing through their inner eye, and that they tried to keep it, alive and undistorted in their own way. Of course, this all became horribly distorted. But my basic premise is, I tell everyone, like, you should activate your higher faculties and see for yourself. As you go through this natural inner awakening and you begin to activate these higher faculties, you'll see all the things that I'm describing. When I was doing my preparation for this class today, that was one of the things, and I'm going to move on to level 2, that I wanted to, emphasize. Like, don't take Aurora's word for it. When Aurora sees, I see these things, I make these paintings, and I'm there, I'm trying to be giving guideposts or blogging about a place I visited. I'm like, yes, I went to blah, blah street and I had this food at this restaurant and, here's where the restaurant is located. And then I'm like, don't take my word for it. Go to blah, blah street, go to the restaurant, go see it, go eat what the food is like. That's what I'm trying to tell everyone. You will really feel the difference between seeing on an anthropomorphic level, which might look like a vision, like you're seeing a room or a house or a cat or a dog or a tree, as opposed to seeing an abstract level. Anthropomorphic is seeing a house, and abstract is seeing just color. It's just understanding color and line and form and tone and movement, and you'll begin to understand that language from that direction. So yes, activate your higher faculties and see for yourself. So okay, just reading this. Pedro says the Christian cross. Okay. Oh, Pedro says, hearing you tell us all these things makes me want to go see it for myself. That is perfect. That is my whole motivation. I'm hoping to inspire and motivate others, and also to confirm to you, like when you actually visit this street and go to that restaurant, you'd be like, wait a minute, I read about that restaurant. I know that it's a good place to eat. I'm going to go check it out. So you'll start to understand when you see with your own inner vision. You'll be like, wait, those inner visions, that kind of rainbow stuff, that's looking like Aurora's paintings. You'll be like, you're on target. You're in the right neighborhood. You're going in the right direction. So let me complete level 1 for right now and move on to level 2. I have to say profound thanks and appreciation for everyone who's part of this conversation and who's been sharing their thoughts and insights in the chat, because you're really spot on. Like your insight is very acute and you're doing very well. So thank you very much.